We are slowly returning to whatever this new normal is going to be as the pandemic may be shifting to an endemic. I'm finding myself trying to remember the before times. Now, I'm not sure how many of you know that I began my ministry as a youth advisor and then a minister of religious education at another one of our churches in Brooklyn, in the city. So many youth overnights at church, or what the former district of us called youth conferences, with groups of 50 to 150 youth coming together for a weekend. Weeks on Star Island, one of our camps that's off the coast of New Hampshire and Maine. And then when I shifted to being the solo pastor 10 years ago at a mid-sized congregation out in Long Island, I continued this practice by joining our Long Island-wide week-long summer camp for all ages. About 100 children and youth and about 50 adult volunteers would gather on Shelter Island for a week-long, 8 days camp with worship and education and fun. It's at the very tip of Long Island, which is so far out that driving, it lets you know exactly why I got the name Long. There's a guitarist on staff at the former FAS summer camp, was what it was called, for children and youth. Sadly, the 30-plus year camp couldn't survive the COVID pandemic. It's gone, and our denomination is striving to sort out what comes next. That guitarist would play a whole range of songs, and it helped to keep energy up when we were sitting around too long. It's the usual mix of camp songs and Beatle hits, but I noticed early in the week he was walking around, mouthing lyrics to himself and practicing a tune that I hadn't heard at the time then anyone sing in so many years. I remember saying, I think he's trying to learn a new song to myself. Is he going to sing that here? Then one worship service, when we were stuck inside due to rainy weather, he sang it. We just heard it beautifully, one version of it from Darnell, Closer to Find from the Indigo Girls. Now, most of the kids can sing along pretty much to anything he would lead them in with songs, and even do pretty well with most of the Beatles songs, surprisingly. But the Indigo Girls was far too afield from Taylor Swift to fly. Me, on the other hand, I'm singing line for line and catching a couple of spots where he tripped over the lyrics. I look around and notice that there are a few other people, all also over, let's say, a certain age, who are singing right along with it. And when the song was over, I realized the youth at my table are all staring at me. One wide-eyed teen girl leans over and whispers, "You really know every line of that song? Wow, I've never heard it before." And in a moment that I will surely never forget, forever enshrining me in the over 40 crowd, I replied, "That song was huge when I was your age." Oh man, did I just say that out loud? Meanwhile, some of you here right now are thinking in response, "Oh, just wait, 40 is nothing." And so the wheel turns. When I was in high school, this song was probably my theme song, certainly by college. Even the line about the mentor with the poster of Rasputin on the wall reminds me of my mentor in my undergrad religion program. Growing up can be hard, and a song that reminds you to stop trying to find perfection and just aim closer for fine can be life-saving when you're navigating the big challenges in life. By a show of hands, who here has ever had to grow up? Not many of you, huh? Okay. It's incredible how we all think, how we all go through that for our whole lives, growing up, and each of one of us secretly thinks we could have done it better somewhere along the way. It's a sin of perfectionism. We pretend that there's this ideal that we can reach, and every foot short from it is a mar against our character, and even worse, a mar against our value as a person. Perfectionism kills a little bit of us inside. It disconnects us from the world before us in all wonder and pain. We create a false sense of self that we can never achieve, and then we don't achieve it. That false sense of self keeps us from staying connected to a sense of reverence for life and for ourselves. I don't talk about the concept of sin too much because so much of religion has twisted it, what it points to. But when I do talk about it, this is what I'm talking about. It's when we go down the wrong path and confuse whatever is going on inside our heads and our egos with what is true and awe-inspiring in the world around us, especially when we replace the sense of reverence with this new sense of perfectionism. The world around us is always in reach. Reverence for life teaches us not to put something on a pedestal, but to relate to it with tenderness and maybe a healthy sense of trepidation. Perfectionism distances us from whatever we put on that pedestal, and it can be very painful when the thing that we put up there is our own sense of self. We idolize what can't be, and then we replace the good of what we are with the pain of what is not. We distance us from us. In the quest for the better me, we lose who we are. We lose our birthrights. But that quest for perfectionism doesn't only impact our own selves, our own souls. It creates cycles of pain for those around us too, like we just heard in that other reading. When we allow ourselves to adhere to impossible standards, we implicitly tell the people around us that they should be doing the same, adhering to impossible standards. When we're overly hard on ourselves, we nurture a kind of sick culture that encourages all around us to buy into it too. All that weird peer pressure and projectile insecurities that we often just call middle school continues into adulthood, right? Into our PTA meetings, into our work conference rooms, and sometimes, yes, into our houses of worship too. Perfectionism can be paralyzing for a community. We can start fixating on how to improve every little thing that we lose focus on our mission and our purpose as a community of openness and mindfulness and reverence. Or as Reverend Peggy is increasingly imagining, a house of prayer for all people. We do well to remember that in religious community, we are here to nurture our individual spirits by caring for one another and helping to heal the world. We don't come here to be perfect. We come here to live with compassion for ourselves, with each other, and in the greater aim of building a world centered in those values, the dream of a beloved community. We raise our children with those values of justice, equity, and compassion, and we hold one another hopefully accountable for those virtues in our lived experience. But we don't come here to be perfect. Perfection is exhausting. It's the group fantasy that tells us that if we just try harder and longer, then the magical, mythical what if will someday come. But it probably never will, or not in a way that our egos want it to come. Over the past 15 years, I've officiated about 100 weddings, and whether I said it or I've heard it in my own wedding when I got married by the officiant, and she said it to me, the clergy often talk about patience, forbearance, and kindness. It's in so many vows, so many homilies. Perfection is not included, thankfully. Successful marriages don't last, and they certainly don't thrive on perfection. So it's left out of the ceremonies. The myth of perfection is probably a contributing factor to many divorces. It's exhausting, and we have to learn to let it go. I see that struggle for parents today. I watch our wider youth exhaust themselves working longer and harder at school, test after test, AP after AP. It's a level of achievement that stays full throttle for far too many years. And then I see the pressure on teenagers to plan courses for college programs they think they're going to major in years down the road. Figure that out at 15. I changed my college major 5 times. In high school, I took 3 versions of every science course you could imagine. Funny where I ended up. But during that whole time, I felt the very real pressure of perfectionism in school for subjects that at the time I just knew I had to take. Perfectionism is exhausting. I see it here from time to time in our church too. We have to work on our social media presence, of course, and we are diligently, or we could wave a magic wand and our new building would be found tomorrow. Past generations had to struggle with this very same challenge of finding a new building to call our spiritual home. So for those of you intrepid leaders who have been working diligently for all these years to lead us through a complicated and major grounds transition, remember that this has happened in our historical DNA before, and we came back to thrive for decades. And we are just about there. Don't get exhausted with the idea that it was going to be easy or that there was a more perfect way to do it. We're all laying the groundwork to renew our children and youth and family ministry that will bring strong ties in our religious education program that may create safe places for our kids, our youth. And that safe place may be the only safe place for some of our kids who are dealing with bullying or coming out as gay or transgender, especially in this day and age. Unitarian Universalism is that place for so many of our kids. We're not perfect, but as a former kid who had to come out, I can tell you that I'd rather a place that was kind and real than a place that was perfect. It's exhausting. And for many of us, we may be grieving the departure from our long-standing building that we loved. And when we're grieving, we cannot fixate on perfection. It's not part of the grief process. Perfection has no saving grace or meaning. It just distracts us from real human connection. And in a time when so many of us must mourn and grieve, the reckless quest for that perfection is a major barrier in the healing of broken hearts. I want to share with you a very short quote from Max Weber from The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. It reads, "Specialists without spirit, sensualists without heart. This nullity imagines that it has attained a level of civilization never before achieved." How many of us feel like we're not doing enough right now? Do you feel like you still need to honor a commitment you made before the world lurched into chaos? Are you holding yourself to a higher standard than you hold your loved ones? In light of the desire of some of us to go back to normal before it's fully safe, I feel echoes of the Puritan work ethic in its most deadly form. There's a book that was our common read for the denomination a few years ago by Roxanne Dubar Ortiz called An Indigenous People's History of the United States. The one that I'm taking this quote from was the more recent edition that was adapted for young people. And Roxanne makes a compelling argument that the Puritans and the Pilgrims were each a cult. They were so outside of mainstream theology that they had to flee their country in order to create godly societies, as they put it. Once I saw that in print, I could feel myself backing away from that zealotry. Yeah, they were a form of cult. What if we sought to deprogram ourselves from the cult of Puritan work ethic that's still taught in our schools and underlines our myth of the American dream? What if we allow this time of physical distancing to become the strangest lesson even for all of us? It's hard for me to accept it today. Maybe it's hard for anyone paying any attention, but Reverend Peggy has quipped about this before, but taking a shower in the morning feels like an accomplishment right now for many of us. You too are absolved of that sin of not being more than a human can be. We can't turn back the clock to save lives, but maybe we can change our addictions to productivity that enable our leaders to fail so tragically. Maybe we can change our habits of corporate consumption or unending growth of markets that leave small towns ruined. Maybe sustainability of markets in our hearts and minds is more important than the wealth of 10 people across the globe. Amidst the genuine worry and pain and fear and death, maybe we can make a ritual of believing that we have the power to reverse this ethic that's killing our planet and wrecking our hearts. I'm going to refuse to believe that cult's lie, that I need to overwork myself to death, recommitting to the changes we need to make to dream a new way of living into a world that is sustainable. Nothing is impractical when it comes to the necessity of a sustainable world. None of us come to religious community, as I said, for perfection. We come in our brokenness and our hopelessness and our joy and our yearning and our striving, and with our curiosity and seeking love. When we get there, we don't judge us by how perfect we are, but how caring we are, how connecting we are, how relevant we are. The Catholic Pope, Pope Francis, once chided his churches that failed to care for the downtrodden and those in need, saying that they should be taxed if they won't help the needy. I don't always agree with Pope Francis, but he offers strong leadership in this regard. our outward stance supporting nonprofits and community groups across the globe through our growing and historically long-standing international ministries is one foundation for our church. It is also in our DNA. Our work toward housing our year-long shelter for migrants and refugees that we just reopened through so many folks' effort and work and leadership from Brother Zachary is another foundation of our ministry. Perfection may be exhausting, and our newcomers will have no patience or need for it, but compassion and forbearance, patience and forgiveness give us life and connect us to our center. That's what we're looking for in religious community. So I invite us all to be open to mistakes, be mindful of one another, and revere that which is before us in all its glory and all its fragilities, more than our worship of finding mistakes and shortcomings sometimes. Perfection is exhausting, but community is where we come home. Spirit of grace, ever remind us that a new way can be found and move us toward the possibility of courageously living our lives in the face of all that is before us now. Amen, and blessed be.